Brighton under Zerbi. If you've had a chance to watch this team play, you know that they are doing some very special stuff. Is it football perfected? I don't know. It's pretty good. We're going to talk about it today, what specifically they do. There's other videos about what they do, but I just wanted to get into more detail. So here it is in a picture in a nutshell. They're building from the back. I have Brighton in the white dots, and they're playing Bournemouth here in the red. And you'll notice how they open up the opponent's back line. Notice the center back stepping off deep on the back line, creating tremendous open space between the fullbacks. And then eventually, as they play the ball out, then back in, a tremendous opportunity. So why are they special, Brighton? One is that they constantly get deep behind the back line. The kind of opportunities that you usually only see in a moment of transition, they can create from open play. Also, their buildup is very advanced because most teams shy away from building through the middle because it's so risky, but they just go straight through it along with building on the sides and the half spaces. It's common to see opportunities like this. He's on sides here. He's just beaten the fullback and the center back by 15 yards. Here's another one, getting in deep behind the fullback. At the top professional level, you usually just don't see this. All right, how do they play? I have a lot here. Usually they're 4-2-4 out of possession. What's special about them I have in red. Most teams run a single pivot, but Brighton run two. So that's the first thing. They use that to build through the central zone, half space, and the wide area. And here's another big detail. They drop both of the strikers in as false nines. The wingers stay high. The fullbacks do a lot of crazy movement, underlapping, losing their marks. Third man runs. They have a lot of, the stuff that you see on a modern possession team, but just have some extra stuff that you don't see too much else. I saw a little bit with Bielsa's Leeds, some similar stuff. But Brighton, they have better players, and they're just playing better. What's the main tactical concept? It's what I call a vertical dilemma. And the idea of this is you're guarding someone, your mark keeps dropping lower to get on the ball. Will you let them and get a free turn? Or will you follow them, which means you're abandoning the space you're supposed to defend? So here's their look, 4-4-2, but both strikers are just basically playing as midfielders. And since the wingers and fullbacks usually stay wide, the fullbacks can sometimes play a little bit more in the half space, but they're pinning the outside four of the opponent. So all of these players are pinned. If the fullback or wingers jumped, there's a free player on the line. And thus, the focus is about the central zone. And I think about it like this. Here we see these 4 levels, okay? And obviously the bottom of the screen is closer to Brighton's goal. This is what they do every single time. 2 center backs, 2 CDMs, and both false nines. Sometimes some fullbacks will invert in that second zone, but typically this is what you see. And they're asking a question of the opponent. What are you going to do? You're going to mark everyone? You're going to give them 2v1s? Or are you going to play with your back line open? So I'd like to talk about 3 possibilities you see from the opponents that Brighton play. To me, a sensible option is just dropping one guy in, playing 1-2-2-1, and keeping a 1 center back, but giving them a spare player in the buildup in this 4v3. And so this would be like versus 4-2-3-1, for example. And Brighton are very good at winning this initial 4v3. They're exceptional at it. Sometimes it's as simple as this. Now, this isn't Brighton. This is Shakhtar in orange. That was Zerbi's previous team, but they played in almost an identical way. And we see a 4v3 here, and a CDM just has enough space to turn. Often it's all about staying behind your mark and understanding, when to move behind the mark. Okay, here, a CDM is checking to the ball to offer support to the center back, okay? And he checks to and releases it 1 touch on a wall pass. After he releases it, now you can see he's behind the mark. So look, he was in front, wall pass, and then he gets behind the mark. Why did they do this? Because of this. They're so good at going to the next level using those false nines. Typically have a little bit more space than an attacking mid, man marked by another central mid, because the false nines are supposed to be marked by the center backs, and the center backs are worried about getting spun and beat to the space behind. So typically, these wall passes have a little bit more space than you see on most teams. Here's a common sequence of play in the 4v3. A striker will curve the run. Maybe they wall pass to find the free center back. Now, this might make the other midfielder jump. And notice the movement here. The CDM plays low and plays behind his mark. And so a horizontal wall pass can free him up. This looks a little bit fancy, but they do this like 20 to 30 times a game when they're in this 4v3. They're simply so good at the timing of movement, playing one touch, and then building straight from the middle with a spare player. Here we see it again. Notice the weak side CDM checking towards the center back and making that diagonal first touch. The idea here is that they do this when the strikers get jumped and it's 2v2, and this frees up a midfielder. They'll also use just a classic half-space diamond, with the top of the diamond being the false nine, and this can get them out middle as well. Here we see the same thing. And when you do build up like this and you build through the middle, you can now play to either side. So it's very dangerous when they have success. Here's an example of the CDM driving up after he was found as a spare player in the build-up. He freezes the opponent's CDM and allows one of those false nines to get on the side of the mark and receive on his front foot. So if you win the initial 4v3 and you move up, the 2v2 on the next line now becomes a 3v2 in your favor. And here we see the front foot pass and driving into the back line. Okay, what some teams do, a more cautious approach, is only press with one striker, one midfielder, so they can keep their two center backs back. 2-2-1-1. Brighton are very good at this as well. What do? Is they often go wide and try to focus on we can see the 2v2 with the fullback and the winger out there. Here they are using just a simple inside to out wall pass with the fullback because there's a lot of space out there. In general, the fullbacks do a lot of very interesting movement here, trying to lose their marks. Here's a pattern I see a lot when they're facing only getting pressed with two guys. Often the CDM will drop in and make a back three. This will shift the strikers, so the other center back has a little more time to drive up the half space. Now, rather than just playing to the fullback will sometimes make this crazy movement here where he will move early across his mark into the half space, which usually pulls the winger a little bit. This opens up the ball to feet for Brighton's winger. This is how Matoma receives it a lot. And you notice now the red winger, he's probably looking at the ball. And this little switch off for a second lets the fullback lose the mark in transition. And as he's trying to find the mark back, it's too late. And that's how they get so far behind the opponent's back line in the middle, and as we see here, on the sides. Here's the fullback just getting in deep. Seeing this image again. They also invert the fullback sometimes, as we see here playing in the middle. And notice he has that player 2v1 with the false nine. Okay, what a lot of teams do is say, no, we're coming too. We're just going to press man on man. Now, this to me seems very difficult to do build up here when you're fully pressed. But this is why Brighton's special. They can deal with this just as well as the other two options. So notice here I've spread out the players. When you press so heavily and the top players stay high, the false nines haven't dropped super deep yet, it just creates a tremendous amount of space, open space in the middle. And they pretty much just use this space for easy wall passes. Okay, here we see a sequence after a long ball. Okay, when the opponent was pressing with a 4v4, notice both the center backs are pulled up deep to try to guard the false nines, and it allows the wingers very easy runs in behind the shoulder of the fullbacks while the center backs are just recovering. You see this a lot, and this is just simple keeper clearing it as far as he can, but the back line is already destabilized. Okay, here we see a 4v4 in the middle. So what's another option other than long ball is now finding the half space pass to one of the false nines. Notice how much space he's moving into and receiving. It's a lot. Later in the play, he does a give and go with the other false nine, and you see both center backs pulled up. You see both fullbacks trying to come inside to cover the space, and thus the wingers are just out free. This happens all game. Okay? Sometimes they'll go outside in when they're 4v4, as we see here, finding the fullback, using that triangle with CDM. After the pass, the fullback is now bombing down the line, trying to lose his mark. Notice that the winger is dropped down to pulling his mark, and so there's just no one on the opponent's back line here. So as the fullback keeps going, you notice there's just no one there. Right? You never see opportunities like this, but Brighton just open teams up. So that's pretty quick. Give me some feedback. I might do another video comparing what City and Arsenal do relative to what Brighton do. There's advantages and disadvantages of both. In short, City have an excellent counter press. When they lose the ball, they get it back. But Brighton have such good opportunities where City is more taking something very small, a small advantage, and turning it into a decent opportunity. Brighton wants you to bite hard, and they want an amazing opportunity. And they're pretty fun to watch. So if you haven't seen them, I advise checking them out.